Welcome to Mishna study Masechet Shabbat Perek Aleph Mishnah Vav. Over here in this Mishnah, we're going to continue the discussion of doing something before Shabbat and having that action continue on its own during Shabbat. And we're going to discuss the first case of dyeing wool. And then we're going to talk about, dyeing wool and dyeing, we'll talk about also flax. And then we're going to go and speak about setting hunting traps. So firstly, Bet Shammai say, you're now allowed to go ahead and place these strands of flax, right? Rambam says it's actually the threads of the yarn on the weft, right? So it goes across the weaving loom, it will go horizontally. They would use these flax strands. What they would do is they would take them, they would soak them in water and some ashes, and then they would put them in the oven and they would turn white, right? And that's how they would actually treat these flax. Now you're not allowed to go ahead and Bet Shammai says you're not allowed to go ahead and put them into the oven before Shabbat unless there's enough time for them to become hot. Right? Shihabil literally means for those vapors to start coming out of it, right? Because you soaked the water before, so now the vapor will start to come out of it. If there's enough time for that, that's enough okay, that's the cooking process. You would have done that, right? Nor are you allowed to go ahead and place the wool into the actual pot itself where you would dye the wool, unless it's enough time for the dye to catch the color. Right, to actually soak in, absorb the color from before Shabbat rolling in. You go ahead and do it right before sunset. That's fine, right? Because it's happening on its own, right? You're not dyeing on Shabbat, and you didn't place it into the dye into the water on Shabbat. You didn't put the wool into the water on Shabbat. Rather, you did it from before Shabbat, and now it's getting dyed on its own. Now, Bet Hillel allow it. There are two conditions, right? I'm doing then two conditions that we need to fulfill for Bet Hillel to actually allow it. And one is, firstly, is that the pot itself doesn't have any fire underneath it, right? You already removed it; it's off the fire. If it's on top of the fire, we worry shemei hatib gehalim. We still have a gezerah, Hachamim have, that you probably worry that someone may come and stoke the coals, right? Which is really igniting a fire. Right, so it can't be that it's on top of coals. It can't be on top of a fire. So this pot of dye is already off the fire. And the second one is that he sealed, right? It was right? Actually, like literally sealed it shut. He sealed the pot shut. Why? Because we have gezerah shemeagis. Also, we can't go ahead. We're not allowed ahead and stir a pot, right? You're not allowed ahead and go ahead and and do that either. That's the second thing. So those are the two conditions when Bet Hillel would allow it, right? So if we're going ahead allowing you to put the dye, put the wool into this, pot of dye before Shabbat. Again, this pot, it can't be on a flame. It has to be off the flame, and the cover needs to be sealed shut. Okay, next case. Bet Shammai say you're not going to go ahead and set a trap for animals, for birds, for fish. Right, you can't go ahead, go to the dock, go near the boats over there. You take a trap, right? A lot of times, we used to do it even as kids. You take a blackfish trap, you put it down right over, right by the boat, and blackfish will swim in. You come back next time, and you'll see some fish in the trap. So you now go ahead. I want to go ahead. I go Friday afternoon, right before Shabbat. I'm going to lay this trap right down, and I'll come back after Shabbat, and I'll have fish for Saturday night. Am I allowed to go ahead and do that? Bet Shammai say no, unless you have enough time for the fish to be trapped in that trap before Shabbat rolls in. So you need to do it, I don't know, half hour before, an hour before, enough time for the fish to actually get trapped before Shabbat. Bet Hillel allow it. Go ahead, do it right before Shabbat. Why? Because I am not hunting them on Shabbat. I set the trap, and the fish are getting trapped on their own. So Bet Hillel would allow it. And as we mentioned, all these halachot over here, for the rest of the perek, halachas.